This is Conversations with Women in Sales, an award-winning podcast created by Barbara Giamanco, who hosted the first 67 episodes. Listen to interviews with amazing women about their journeys in their sales careers, often discussing sales leadership tips, ideas, and strategies. We aim to inspire women to consider a sales career and for some women to grow into sales leadership. Men, we appreciate your allyship. And now, your host, Lori Richardson.
Thank you to our sponsor, Scalibrium. Scalibrium just added a methodology-agnostic module to their existing coaching platform to improve the effectiveness of your sales and go-to-market teams. This includes out-of-the-box templates and frameworks, enhancing collaboration and driving better outcomes. See what all the excitement is about at scalibrium.com.
I'm so excited because I'm here today with my old friend, Gabrielle Blackwell. GB, how are you doing? So good to see you.
I'm doing great. I'm so glad I get to see you and spend some time with you today, Lori.
Yeah, let's give some kudos about GB. She is a LinkedIn sales voice. She's a HubSpot Modern Sales Leader Award recipient. And currently she's Senior Manager of Sales Dev at Lattice. Welcome. I've been reading your posts of late, and I've thought a lot about bad behavior in sales for some time. I've talked to a lot of women who have been leaving sales totally, people. Women are leaving. If you want more women on your sales teams, they're leaving. Right? Am I right, GB?
Yeah, and I'll say this too. From my side, I also see the droves of women, especially Black women and women of color, who are leaving, and I'd imagine as well, an even more alarming rate than just the general women demographic as well. And so, yeah, if someone's, oh, I want women on my team, but they're all leaving, I'm like, do you really want women on your team? Do you?
Yeah.
No.
If you did, we'd all be happy and thriving and encouraging all of our female friends to come on board. And it's just not happening. And I think when the economy turned, that's when I started noticing more bad behavior. It sounds like you've noticed it for a while, longer than I have. But what I saw was it was just, don't bring your whole self to work. Just do what I say, do what you have to do. And if you don't like it, hey, just leave. So I don't know. Tell us a little bit about what you've noticed since about 2016, right?
Yeah, so I got into sales, software sales in 2015. Little context, I joined a team, and I think within the first 3 or 4 months, the only man in the office was my boss. And so it was a team of all women. And so that was my introduction to sales. And I was like, okay, cool. And I just thought this was normal, not at all. And before going through my entire experience, one of the things that I think is interesting to look at since the pandemic, one of the things that happened within, say, sales, when I'm speaking software sales in particular, because that's just the purview that I have, is you had a lot of folks who were transitioning because you had service industry folks, you had teachers, for example, you had people who just didn't want to go into work, who were now like, all right, I want to find a different way in. So that already is going to change the entire dynamic of the talent that's coming in. I think also what you saw too with George Floyd, what was that in 2020 or 2021? Or 2020. So then you also see a lot of companies who are now presenting as very inclusive, and they're focusing on social justice, and they're doing it up until the point that it comes time to look in the mirror. And so I think you have this interesting dynamic of folks who were seeing software sales or sales in general as something that it's really not, if I'm being very honest. And
look like the place to be, right?
It definitely golden halo, a lot of brand marketing to present as one thing and look really good. And then you get on the inside, and 6 months later, you're like, what is this crap show that I'm in? And it's not to say that every place is like this, but I know I've had a number of experiences at the majority of companies that I've worked at where I was the target of whether it's discrimination, harassment, bullying, right, from different leaders in the organizations all the way up to a CEO, right? So once and I can go on a whole tirade rant on how this is nothing new within corporations whatsoever. Right. It's not sales in particular. It's just the way that
corporate world
runs and the history around it. It's there is typically there's a reason why we see more men and more white men in particular in positions of power, because that's how it was created. So like these businesses and these companies were not created for women to thrive, like
Right.
in and of itself. And so unless an organization and its leadership is willing to investigate and inquire into what is it that keeps women from having the sentiment that I can thrive, I can be supported, I'm cared about fully and at least fully and completely, like I'm able to come into this organization and feel like, you know what, doesn't matter that I have kids or that I'm a caretaker or whatever, or even for men who are a little bit more effeminate, if I'm not a macho man, I can still show up and I can still be supported and I can still thrive at work. And I think there has to be a recognition that's not the majority of companies right now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When did you see red flags at different, can you give us some examples? There are women that are in situations that might feel like bad behavior, but they might actually be abusive.
Yeah.
When did it kind of change for you that you go, you know what, this isn't just bad behavior, this is like abusive?
Yeah, so for me, it was within like 2 years of joining sales that I really started to, and I can reflect back. Hindsight is 2020, but like in hindsight, I can look at times where there's like initial red flags that I got, which was it's not abusive yet, but it's more like, all right, seeing my boss and their relationship and their dynamic with the men on the team compared to their dynamic with me, right? And this can show up as like women not getting feedback about the actual job compared to getting feedback more about their personality. And
Mm.
so the boss who's the person delivering this quote unquote personality feedback instead of skills feedback, while they're doing all that for the guys on the team, that to me is not like an abuse. That's not, that to me is just like bad management and a lack of coaching, but it opens up the door for neglect. So that if a woman on a team starts receiving negative treatment from their peers, for example, that does come off as menacing or harassing or bullying, for example, by virtue, if it's a boss and they're not taking care of one employee, but they're taking care of the other employee, that opens up the one employee who's being neglected for abuse. And on top of that, the manager's going to go, that's not the way that I know this person over here. Right. So they
Right.
become an enabler in that. So to me, it's not to say that the initial red flag is a expression of abuse, but to me, also fun fact, neglect is actually a form of abuse. It's
Yes.
just that doesn't get talked about the most. I think that's one thing. And especially if the feedback is mostly about personality, that to me is more of a covert form of, hey, this might be something that turns into something different. I also have the opportunity to express my concerns. Hey, I'm noticing that the feedback that I'm getting is more about my personality. And if I'm saying the right words, I'm trying to understand how that connects to my actual performance. Can you help me understand what that is?
Which is a
Like,
very great way to explain that. And yet, did you get good answers back?
at that time, I didn't know to ask because I was like 24 or
Ah,
25.
okay.
And yeah, it was like, oh, we can just tell how old you are by how you speak. And I'm like, that's how old I am. I don't know what else to tell you. And so now I'm like, now I'm like, wait a minute, is it just because I'm younger than the majority of the team that this is the reason why? When really what was needed was a lot of coaching. So I think that's one of the lighter expressions.
Have you ever been told you're too much? We just need less, a little less. Because I have.
Yeah, I've been, because I think there's also going to be a difference. I will say this, there is a difference that I see in the experience of white women compared to Black women. So it's more about, I've never seen as assertive, and I'm sure this is like a commonality. Never seen as assertive, seen as aggressive or angry.
Oh,
So that's happened as well, where it's like I'm giving feedback about something that's very concerning and that has an impact on the business. And the response back to that is, if I'm reading between the lines, it sounds like you're angry with me. And I'm like, first of all, that doesn't matter how I feel towards you right now. Honestly, even if I was angry with you, it doesn't matter. What we're talking about is the fact that there are all these problems going on that are highly resolvable, and it's having a huge impact on the business, and we can measure that out. And I'm actually more concerned, person in the VP position, why you're not thinking this way. Help with what's going on here. And so I think folks who have that kind of thought process, which is, hey, when someone within a certain vessel, a woman, a person of color, whatever, when they give me feedback and I immediately go to, oh, they're angry with me versus, hey, they're actually giving me some feedback that's highly actionable, highly specific, what is it about that person receiving the feedback that keeps them from seeing it as feedback?
Yeah.
Right. And also recognizing the power imbalance as well that's there too. And so that to me is also, these are also little tiny things that if that person is thinking that way, that opens up the door. Like that to me is like a symptom of probably an unhealthy environment for folks who are not cisgendered white dudes to go, hey, I can actually have an impact because it's a place actually receptive to someone in your body actually having a positive impact. Can they fathom that?
And this is
Yeah.
after I think about how hard you've worked in different roles, because I've known you for a while. And so you work, and you get some treatment like that. It's got to be very frustrating. And I know with some women I've talked with where their manager just wrote them off and just didn't, they've told me, because I've tried to coach some of them. They said, I just don't talk with her or him. That's it.
Yeah.
Can a leader do that?
I've had experience, I will say this, been a people leader for the majority of my time working in sales. And I can count on one finger the number of times where I felt like, hey, with this person on my team, I actually don't feel safe because I've seen how the words can get misconstrued. There's labels that get put on me, or there's a way that they're representing me that doesn't feel congruent with how I'm actually showing up. And so there's been one time where I've asked an HR person to shadow our one-on-ones. So I'm like, I'm going
That'd
to
be different though. Thoughtful.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that's thoughtful. I've seen male managers do this to both men and women.
Yeah.
Just be like, they don't listen. So they don't get any of my time.
Which is a withholding. I think there's a lot of books that I read around like gaslighting and narcissistic abuse. And we have to realize, like in sales in particular, I'm gonna be honest, you have a lot of really insecure people who come into sales and who are able to get that dose of dopamine to have this artificial self-esteem. That is a real thing that we don't talk about. You see a lot of folks, and I'm not saying it's everybody, but the number of times that I've asked folks, like, what led you into sales or what led you to sales? A lot of times people were just like, I didn't grow up with money, so now I want money. There's already like an insecurity that's there. Not saying that it's a bad thing, but then if people are not doing the work to figure out their own insecurities and they step into a people leadership position, there's to me like one of two choices. Is one, if somebody comes onto your team and triggers, you're now like, oh man, I'm facing my insecurity right here because they're really good at things that you're not. They figured things out that you haven't. Great managers are going to go, you know what, that's amazing, Lori. Walk me through this process. Help me understand. And how can I help you? Or, hey, I see you making a huge impact over here. Here's the thing that I can't figure out. I'd love to get your eyes and ears on it. And by the way, I also want to make sure that you get recognized for that work too, right? That's an amazing way of going about it. But a lot of times it's, Lori, you're making me look stupid. They don't say it out loud. You're making me look stupid. I'm intimidated. I'm scared. I'm a scared little animal. And so I'm going to attack you because I'm scared. And then you're like, hey, I'm getting attacked. And people are like, what did you do to them? You're like, I think I was just being myself. And so, and the cycle continues. But I'm like, that is to me, that kind of dynamic that can first show up. But I learned a lot of stuff, like learning about like internal family systems and our families of origin, learning about like power dynamics and demanding things, and also learning about like gaslighting and narcissistic abuse. Yeah. And a lot of times it's just, again, I think you get a lot of people who are highly insecure, who did not grow up in super warm, loving families where you learn emotional adaptation and things like that. And then you get thrown into a corporate environment and it just continues on. I think there is, for the employee who feels like they are on the receiving side of it, there is power in knowing what it is. And so there's power in actually starting to research how does gaslighting, how does narcissistic abuse actually show up, right? And also there's power in knowing how would organizations approach a person in their company who does have a diagnosis of narcissism or bipolar disorder, or is maybe on the sociopathic spectrum. And it's okay, so this is not a skill development issue, it's a behavioral issue. So sometimes it can be very difficult to be the person on the receiving end of it.
Yeah.
Also, there is power in knowing what it is knowing how to communicate that with leaders inside the organization so that they're able to approach the situation appropriately, and it not just being a matter of, oh, I don't like the way they're giving feedback. It's a matter of, hey, this is actually a huge behavioral issue,
Yeah.
and they need to address it as a behavioral issue and not a skill development issue.
Yeah, and the problem is when you couple that with inexperienced HR folks or HR who just is aligned with leadership. Oh, GB, that's just Bob. That's just Joe. That's just the way they are. Or more, really, did that really happen? And not believe someone. This is what I've run into with a number of people who have gone to HR with issues and didn't get the support.
Yeah, then I say go to HR and go seek legal counsel. So I've had folks who I've mentored or I guess advised informally where they're like, "Hey, I'm having this experience at work. What should I do about it?" And I was like, "That sounds like harassment. What's going on?" Or so for example, let's say that or it sounds like retaliation. Hey, you saw there was a problem with you and your boss, or there was a conflict between you and your boss. And now you don't have access to the same meetings that you were once involved with. You're not getting the coaching that you once got. And then also you sat in a meeting where they talked all types of sideways about you in front of everybody else. That to me sounds potentially like it was retaliation. So I'd be like, hey, yes, go and consult HR and ask for their advice on what to do here and or ask specifically for what you need. Have a very specific request, but also go and seek legal counsel because these are the folks who are going to know what your rights actually are in an unbiased way so that you are, again, empowered with knowledge and information. I think where a lot of things get messed up, and this is to me is like where a bully or somebody who is abusive can continue to do these kinds of things is they're relying on you not having access to information. Like, they're depending on you feeling like you deserve this and that it's normal. But as soon as you know that it's not normal and that you don't deserve it and that you have rights as an employee, and whether or not the HR team in place and senior leadership is willing to respect those rights and acknowledge it, doesn't mean that there's not outside counsel that will hold your company accountable.
Yeah.
So I think there's always like power in the employee. My mother said that to me many years ago. So I was dealing with a boss who was absolutely atrocious to me. And she goes, Gabrielle, you need to hold your manager accountable. All right. So go to the skip level. The skip level doesn't do it. Go to the second line skip level. Go to HR. Go to the EEOC. You have resources available to you. It's always dependent upon. I had a coach who told me this. She goes, it just depends on how brave you want to be.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Tell a little more about that because you're going to feel lonely, right?
It's scary. It's really scary because it's your job, it's your earnings, it's your way. We can look at like kind of Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. And on the bottom is like safety and security. And then there's like food and shelter. And so it's hitting on your absolute baseline foundational needs. And so it's going to be scary. It's going to put you in a survival state, more likely than not. And so it's right to be able to go, you know what? This is me. This is me in my talk track where I'm like, okay, I'm Gabrielle Blackwell. I do great work. I'm doing great work. I'll say this, you don't need to do great work to be treated decently. I just want to put that out there. That's the most important thing is
right.
You deserve to be treated decently and like a human being by virtue of you being a human being, period. But for me, I'm like, you know what? I had this moment where I went, you know what? This company needs me more than I need this company. My boss needs me more than I need my boss. Let me start acting like it.
Yeah.
Because this boss man or boss woman over here that's treating me wild right now, they got it twisted and they're counting on me not having the self-esteem that I have. Yeah. And like I had to learn the importance of really upping my self-esteem before going into these corporate environments because I'll say this, I've had many experiences of not being in super healthy or supportive environments and sometimes just outright dangerous environments.
Yeah.
The way that I've been able to navigate those situations and come out even better on the other side is directly correlated to like how I see myself. If I see myself as amazing, if I see myself as valuable, right? Like someone treats me, if there's even like the smallest hint of you're treating me crazy, I'm like, you're the crazy one, not me. And you're going to regret treating me crazy because I'm just going to leave and the karma's losing me, baby. So that's a mindset. Earlier on, it was very difficult though. And like, thankfully, I had mentors. I had a really great community around me who were like, you need to go and seek counsel just
Yeah.
to give a barometer as to where you're at and what your options are so that you're not feeling the only option is for you to either stay in this like horrendous place or completely leave and abandon a career that you've invested a lot of time and energy into.
Wow. Yeah. So the two messages I'm hearing, if you're new or you're not feeling so confident, find some mentors, find some people to talk to outside of your company, and make sure that I always say, if I'm feeling like I'm tolerated and not celebrated, I'm in the wrong place, whether it's family, friends, or work. You need to be where you feel good and you feel special and appreciated. And you don't need to have that kind of a job, particularly if you're a woman and you're really good at what you do, because sales isn't for everybody. I think we know that. So we want to make sure that it's a good fit. But if it is a good fit, then you need to find those leaders that help you excel. And to the leaders that might be listening, this is real. This is happening. And I'm worried that we're going to be losing more women that just say, you know what? I don't need this. I can go, I can be independent. I can be a realtor. I can do 10 other things. And so if you care and you want to build inclusive sales teams, these are things you need to be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say too, it's like from the responses that I've been getting to some of the posts that I've been sharing, and it's not just from salespeople, right? It's so many folks from all over the place, like everybody from like nurses to folks who work in design are sharing these things. And I've had a coach in the past she's a woman, and one of the things that she shared with me was like, yeah, these corporate environments are so much of the feminine is taken out of corporations. And it's like being a man is the priority kind of thing. And there are companies and there are leaders who don't subscribe to that thinking and that logic or who have that sentiment. And so, yes, sales is hard. Yes, sales is not for everybody, but I think you can say the same thing about companies and leaders, right? It can be really easy to go from one company to the next and have a bad manager or have like really adverse experiences. Then at a certain point in time, you got to do what's best for you. If you're like, honestly, I can't do this anymore, you got to do what you got to do. I think for me, I also was like, thankfully, I had a really great boss, the first sales gig that I had, and I had a really great experience. And so for me, there was always, and then I had then it got sandwiched in. There's all this other junk, right?
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. But I think what that initial experience did for me was it did show me that and I want to say this very intentionally, but it's if I pay a little bit more attention to, or if I value how I feel, then I will probably put myself in a much better position. What I've seen happen, this is more so my own reflection, is I saw how much somebody was going to pay me.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I can tolerate this for however long until it was like, okay, a year and a half in. I'm like, actually, I don't need to tolerate this.
I don't need money that bad.
I don't need the money. I can go find ways of making up that money if I really needed to. But I think for me, I'm like, woo, I'm witchy, right? So for me, it's always been like my external environment is usually reflecting back something as to what's going on with me internally. And so there were times where I'll be honest, yeah, like I put up with a lot of crap because I didn't know any other way to be. So I was not to say that I was deserving of that or that we're not going to victim shame
You
or
didn't know. You
just
didn't know what you didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's also why I want to start talking about this stuff a little bit more publicly, because when I wanted to talk about stuff, it's like everybody's like, don't talk about it. You're alone in it. But thankfully, there's like therapy and coaching and communities and support and so many resources. Not all of them are amazing, but there's still stuff out there that's okay. I trust that over time, I can put myself in a much better situation. And I will always continue to value my own internal experience And I also trust in my ability to get myself to a much better place. And so that I will say has been super duper helpful just to have that level of optimism at the same time.
Yeah, and I love that too because I have a lot of optimism about the sales profession. When you have a good situation, it is an amazing way for women like me to have gotten out of poverty, to raise a family, and it can be the best high-paying role with flexibility that one could ever have. But I also want to be realistic too, in that if someone's having trouble in it, reach out, talk to people. Anybody can reach out to me. I talk to people all the time. And I just want to encourage people to be in a place where they're feeling good and feeling happy, they're contributing, and it's a positive experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think circling back to that, all depends on how brave or how courageous you want to be. Like, I just want to note how it can be so hard to reach out to somebody. It can be super duper hard. And in a lot of ways, society has conditioned us to stay quiet about the hardest of things. And it's no, we're just supposed to be happy all the time. So I just want, there's things where I'm like, I just want to say, hey, the unhappy emotions, the unhappy feelings, the feelings of feeling like overlooked or dismissed or discarded or whatever, insignificant, those are real. And those are usually, I'll say for myself, those are the internal cues. For myself, there was times where I just ignored all the internal cues that something was wrong. It was like, but no, I'm making this much money, that can't be. But no, I'm this much further along in my career, that can't be. And so in these ways that I was ignoring myself, I was dismissing myself. And so there was this absolute requirement for me to relearn how I relate to myself and how I'm feeling, and to trust that, hey, it doesn't, because I can go and talk to a friend or I can talk to a mentor and I can tell them about what's going on and they could be like, oh no, that's not the case, right? Because if they haven't figured their stuff out, so I think the most important thing too is just trust yourself and get curious about yourself, get curious about what's going on. And also because in some places it might not be abusive, bullying behavior. Things don't always have to get to the absolute worst level for it to be like, I need to make a change. Sometimes you just realize, you know what? I've got some needs that are not being met. I actually value having a close relationship and dynamic with my boss, where it doesn't mean that we're like best friends, but we can be friendly and we can talk about life. I need that. So when I don't get it from my boss, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
We're not. So it doesn't mean that my boss is a bully. Just means like, you know what? I know what it takes for me to do. I know I can do great work. I know what it takes for me to do great work. I'm not satisfied with doing mediocre work. And so I'm going to put myself in places where I actually can do great work and it doesn't take everything out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I really appreciate you bringing it up. But when I started reading it, I was like, oh, this is great. I'm glad that you're a voice out there that people recognize and maybe identify with, and see you're a leader in SaaS. And I really appreciate you speaking out. And I hope that people listening will do something based on where they're at. If they're in sales and they're not feeling like it's a good situation, they'll think about it and look inward like you're suggesting, and maybe talk to others. And if they are a leader and they want to know why they can't keep more women or more Black women or more people on their team that make it an inclusive, amazing team, that they'll maybe question some things too and reach out as well. So yeah, EB, awesome. Always great to talk with you. It's been too long. We need to do this more often. So thank you so much. And you can follow Gabrielle. We'll have information on how to connect to her and follow her. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Lori.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conversations with Women in Sales. You can find all of our episodes at womensalespros.com/podcast. Help us spread the word, and let's change the face of B2B sales.